In my debate with Rabbi Singer, he brought up the topic of the genealogy of Jesus during our cross-examination. So I made a few comments about it, but wasn't able to provide what I thought was a satisfactory answer in the moment. This can be a big topic to tackle when you're on the clock. So I wanted to take some time here to examine the objection properly. Now, anyone who accepts the New Testament as scripture, as I do, knows that the issue of Yeshua's genealogy is settled in the first verse of the first chapter of the first book of the New Testament. This is the genealogy of Yeshua the Messiah, son of David, son of Abraham. There it is in Holy Scripture. Jesus descended from David, as was required of the Messiah. And the genealogy in Luke 3 teaches the same thing. I mean, if this was an issue in the first century, Yeshua's messianic claim would have never gotten off the ground, particularly among his first followers who were all Jewish. But of course, for Rabbi Singer and others who reject the New Testament, the genealogy of Jesus in these two Gospels is far from conclusive. In fact, it's brought up as an objection to his meeting the qualifications of the Jewish Messiah. And yes, there are differences between the two genealogies found in Matthew and Luke. And we could spend time talking about those differences and why they were each written that way, which is fascinating. They're actually very Jewish in nature in terms of being as focused on theology as they are on biology, which is exactly what we see in the Hebrew Bible. It's a very Jewish way of tracing genealogies. But the differences between the two genealogies isn't really the problem. In fact, those discrepancies are a distraction from the real point. The real problem, which we're going to focus on in this video, is this. The Tanakh clearly states that the Messiah will be a descendant of King David and from the tribe of Judah. And it also teaches that tribal affiliation flows through the father. So, if Jesus was born of a virgin and had no earthly father, how could he be descended from David and the tribe of Judah? This is the crux of the objection. And of course, Rabbi Singer and others who hold this view will argue that on this basis, Jesus couldn't possibly have been the Messiah. Now, this seems like a pretty tough objection to overcome because most Christians haven't studied biblical genealogies or how sonship and tribal affiliations were determined in the Hebrew Bible. But here's the thing. This entire line of argumentation rests on the assumption that a male child can never be included in the lineage of a man who wasn't his biological father. In his book, 26 Reasons Why Jews Don't Believe in Jesus, Asher Norman elucidates this assumption. He writes, "The Messiah ben David must be Jewish, from the tribe of Judah. Under Jewish law, tribal affiliation is through the birth father only. Since Jesus allegedly had no human father, he had no tribal affiliation. Therefore, Jesus was not from the tribe of Judah and is eliminated from messianic consideration." Pretty cut and dry, right? Well, except for one thing. The assumption that a male can never be included in the lineage of a man who wasn't his biological father is wrong. Under Jewish law, tribal affiliation is typically through the birth father, but not always. There's biblical precedent in the Tanakh that a male can be included in the lineage of a man who's not his biological father. And we're going to look at a couple examples in a minute. But there's an even bigger factor that I want to mention up front. The Tanakh doesn't provide direct commandments or teachings regarding how tribal affiliation must be determined. Rather, it's a pattern that we see. When the land is divided and the people are counted, they always follow the father's tribe. And this pattern makes sense, and it's naturally been adopted into Jewish law and tradition. But strictly speaking, there's no biblical mandate for how tribal affiliation must be reckoned. So the declaration that Jesus cannot be accounted to the tribe of Judah without a biological father is actually not a biblical claim. Okay, with that in mind, let's take a look at some of the exceptions we find in the Tanakh. Deuteronomy 25 describes God's commands regarding Levirate marriage, which is when a man dies and leaves his widow childless. In that case, the brother of the man who died is obligated to marry the widow and produce a child. And the Torah requires that the firstborn child of this Levirate marriage should be counted in the genealogy of the man who died childless. If brethren shall dwell together, and one of them shall die and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without to a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in to her and take her to him for a wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn which she bears shall succeed in the name of his brother who is dead, that his name may not become extinct in Israel. So levirate marriage is one way that a male can be included in the lineage of a man who isn't his biological father. And through this arrangement, the children actually become heirs of their dead father's land and possessions, and the family line is considered unbroken. And this is true as well in the case of adoption. So consider the case of Caleb, who was one of the 2 faithful spies that Joshua sent out to survey the promised land. In Numbers 32:12, we learn that Caleb is the son of Jechoniah the Kenizzite, which would make him a biological descendant of the Edomites. In other words, he wasn't from an Israelite tribe. And then in Joshua 15, we discover that, according to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua, he gave Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, a portion among the people of Judah, Kiriath Arba, that is, Hebron. So God adopted Caleb, a non-Israelite, into the tribe of Judah. And there's more evidence in the genealogical tables in 1 Chronicles 2. Now, to be fair, these genealogies are somewhat confusing, and scholars are divided on whether the Caleb in this chapter is the same Caleb who accompanied Joshua. But if it is the same man, he's made a descendant of Judah through his adoptive father Hezron. And either way, Caleb inherited a tribal affiliation that he wasn't born into. But that's not all. The Torah also teaches that a male can be included in the lineage of a man who's not his biological father through maternal lines. In Numbers 27, we see Zelophehad's daughters petitioning Moses after their father died. Why should our father's name disappear from his clan because he had no son? Give us property among our father's relatives. So Moses brought their case before the Lord, and the Lord said to him, "What Zelophehad's daughters are saying is right. You must certainly give them property as an inheritance among their father's relatives, and give their father's inheritance to them. Say to the Israelites, if a man dies and leaves no son, give his inheritance to his daughter." God decreed that in certain instances, the father's name and posterity was to flow through a daughter. And this means that if she marries outside of her father's tribe, her inheritance would transfer to her husband's tribe. We also see this play out in 1 Chronicles 2 in the story of a man named Sheshan, who was a descendant of Judah. And in this passage, we see his genealogy continued through his daughter. Now Sheshan had no sons, only daughters. But Sheshan had an Egyptian slave whose name was Jarha. So Sheshan gave his daughter in marriage to Jarha, his slave, and she bore him Attai. Attai fathered Nathan, and Nathan fathered Zabad, and so on and so forth. All told, there are 13 generations mentioned here as the descendants of Sheshan through his daughter, and they're all recorded under the tribe of Judah. So here's the Tanakh plainly showing that tribal identity and heredity can also flow through a daughter. On top of that, in ancient Judaism, an adoptive father was always considered the father in every respect. And since both of Jesus' parents were descended from David, he was clearly, whether by adoption or levirate marriage or the bloodlines of his mother, he was clearly a legitimate heir to the throne of David, as all his first century Jewish followers knew. Here are 2 other factors to consider. First, while it's generally accepted in Jewish tradition that tribal affiliation passes through the father, one's Jewish ethnicity has long been a matter of matrilineal descent. It comes through the mother. Both Orthodox and conservative Judaism hold this position. And if that's the case, then Jesus inherited his Jewish lineage from his mother Mary, who was a descendant of King David. And secondly, another common objection we hear has to do with the curse of Jehoiachim. People who want to challenge Yeshua's genealogical credentials will sometimes point to the fact that Jehoiachim is listed in Matthew 1:12 as an ancestor of Jesus, and he's referred to as Jechoniah in that list, but it's the same man. They'll point out that God cursed Jehoiachim in Jeremiah chapter 22. He describes Jehoiachim as a signet ring that he would remove from his finger. And God's curse seems to invalidate Yeshua's right to the throne of David. Verse 30 says, "Thus says the Lord, write this man down as childless, a man who shall not succeed in his days. For none of his offspring shall succeed in sitting on the throne of David and ruling again in Judah." So, the argument goes, if Jesus is a descendant of Jehoiachim, how can he be the Messiah, since this curse prevents any of Jehoiachim's descendants from assuming David's throne? Well, it turns out this curse was either limited to Jehoiachim's immediate offspring, or God later lifted it. We know this because Jehoiachim's grandson, Zerubbabel, was blessed by God as the ruler of Judea. Haggai 2:23 says, "On that day, declares the Lord of hosts, I will take you, O Zerubbabel," Jehoiachim's grandson, "my servant, the son of Shealtiel, declares the Lord, and make you like a signet ring, for I have chosen you, declares the Lord of hosts." It's no coincidence that the same imagery of a signet ring is used in Jehoiachim's curse and then repeated in the blessing of his grandson Zerubbabel. And interestingly, there are several rabbinic sources that say Jehoiachim repented in Babylon and God forgave him and lifted the curse. Now, that may or may not be true, but it's at least how Jewish thinkers reconciled this change in the curse that they saw. Now, if you're not convinced that the curse was reversed, here's one more thing for you to consider. Because of his virgin birth, Jesus had only one human parent. And according to Luke 3:31, his mother, Mary, was descended from David, but not through Jehoiachim. It was Joseph who descended through Jehoiachim. But Joseph was Jesus' legal father, not his biological one. So Jesus was of King David's royal bloodlines through his mother Mary. So if the curse of Jehoiachim even still existed, it would have stopped at Joseph and not passed on to Jesus. Here's one last interesting tidbit. With the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, all of the meticulously kept genealogical scrolls were destroyed. This is pretty significant because it means that today, Jews have no way of tracing anyone's ancestry. In fact, most Jewish people today have no idea which tribe they descended from. So for the last almost 2,000 years, we've had no way of knowing if a man was from David's lineage or not. I mean, the lineage of the Jewish people has been intermingled for centuries, both on a national level between tribes and an international level between Jews and other ethnicities, which is why there are Jews today of every color and nationality. So if modern Judaism is correct that the Messiah has not yet come, how in the world are they going to validate his ancestry and tribal affiliation when he does? To me, this is just another compelling reason in support of the messiahship of Yeshua. He came at a time when the Messiah must have come in order to validate his ancestry through King David. Once the temple was destroyed, that ship had sailed. But I'll be honest, this whole idea of using the genealogies of Jesus to try to discredit his messianic credentials strikes me as disingenuous because ultimately it's cherry picking. It's a position that accepts all the verses of the New Testament that trace the lineage of Jesus, but rejects all the verses that openly declare that he is the promised Jewish Messiah. It's picking and choosing what you want to believe in order to make the point you want to make. And yet, even when cherry picking, the arguments fail to undermine the messianic credentials of Jesus. Thanks for watching. Shalom.